Welcome back to News Talk. Well, it may soon be a lot easier to catch a flight from the United States to Cuba. A newly announced deal paves the way for commercial flights to the island nation to begin taking off from the U.S. Those flights are still months away from happening, but it's another step as the two nations reestablish diplomatic relations. Michael Lavers of the Washington Blade joins us today. And Michael, we hear you just came back from a trip to Cuba.
Yeah,
wow.
I was there in May reporting on the LGBT rights movement on the island, and it was about 6 months after the U.S. and Cuba announced the normalization of relations. We're talking on the year anniversary of that. Some things have changed on the island, but some things have not changed. So it's a pretty mixed picture. The human rights situation certainly is still quite concerning. I know that several of the sources with whom I met down in Cuba back in May, they were trying to come back into the country in July from attending a human rights workshop. They were detained at the airport in Havana. Their belongings were confiscated and things like that. So this was just a few months ago, and then you hear reports of regular arrests, detentions of people who publicly criticize the government. So that certainly has not changed. However, the dialogue between the U.S. and Cuba certainly has moved forward, as you mentioned in the introductory piece. There's discussion about restoring commercial flights, which would have been amazingly welcome for me when I went down in May. It's just a very difficult process.
All right, let's start there. It's a little difficult still to get there. Charter flights, I understand that's the only way to get onto the island. How do you get
Right, you can't just go online, say, and book a flight on American from DCA to Havana. You have to go through a charter, and it's... And
what city did they fly out of?
I flew out of Miami. You can go through New York. I think there's a new flight out of LA now as well.
So when you arrive, I mean, you're arriving at the international airport in Havana, I guess. I mean, what do you see? I mean, when you're flying in, does it look like a typical city, a big city? Do we see skyscrapers?
Yeah, Havana's the largest city in the Caribbean. It's several million people. So when you see it from afar, you know, you see you see tall buildings. It's just any other city. There's traffic. There's infrastructure, things like that. But when you get on the ground, it's almost as though you're stepping back in time 50 years. You don't see any advertisements. The only thing you see are slogans in support of the government, Fidel Castro, Raúl Castro, you know, supporting the revolution. So, and you're showing some of the clips here. That's kind of what it looks like.
It looks empty to me.
Yeah,
are the streets pretty empty?
There's a lot of people on the streets, especially in Havana. The thing that really stuck out with me, I had a chance to leave Havana and I drove to another part of the country, and there's practically no traffic on the highways and on the interstates.
Well, people don't generally have cars, do they?
Right. A lot of Cubans make less than $100 a month. That's the official salary from the government. So it's really difficult just to keep food on the table and keep your house in order, let alone get a car and drive even around Havana. So life is very difficult in Cuba for anyone, and the normalization of relations really hasn't changed that in terms of the average living situation. They do have more access to the internet, but again, you have to pay for that, and that's very expensive for the average Cuban who's making $80 a month, say. So. And
the cars are older models? In my head, I'm seeing 1950 model cars.
And that may sound like a cliche, but when you go to Cuba, you actually see those on the roads. I had a chance to ride in a few of them, just following some of the activists that I followed, and they're literally held
the people who have these cars are pretty proud of them, right?
They're exceptionally proud of them. They're held together literally by duct tape in some cases, you know, like old lawnmower parts. But it's really just amazing to see these cars from the 1960s still able to run and, you know, run fairly well. So it's actually quite an interesting experience to see that.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your experience of the accommodations, the food, the people, those kinds of things.
It was a little hard. I'm somebody who doesn't eat meat, so it was a little bit challenging in Cuba because there's a lot of pork and there's a lot of, you know, ham and things like that. But aside from that, the accommodations I had, I stayed in a private house in Old Havana. That was a really wonderful experience, actually. Every morning the woman who ran the house made me breakfast, and it was fairly inexpensive. It's right in Old Havana, so you literally step out of you walk outside and you hear music and you see kids running around the square. It was a really wonderful experience. And then there's private restaurants called paladares, which are not run by the government. You're going to get a lot better food at those places as opposed to the government-run places. And that's something that has started happening in the last few years as the Cuban government has slowly, and I stress slowly, tried to open up the system. There's more private ownership of restaurants and these houses where people can rent out rooms. They're called casa particulares, and so people make money that way. But so in some ways there's a privileged class in Cuba now developing because of that. But
entrepreneur types.
Right, but if you don't...
How much would you say they would make, say, in a week?
I remember talking with a taxi driver who was a doctor in Cuba, and he made more money in a day driving a taxi than he would in a whole month making his salary from, working at a hospital. So that's a really interesting experience and a really interesting dynamic that you're seeing as more and more people are starting to go into business for themselves. It's just far more economically sustainable for them to not work as a doctor and yet, drive tourists around in taxis. So that's a really interesting thing that you see more and more of in Cuba, certainly.
I would think that just the whole monetary structure would be a huge challenge for the nation as they try to kind of catch up to what's going on, especially with the United States being right next door. Yeah,
it was really challenging. There's two separate currencies in Cuba, one for the Cuban people to use, and then there's one for foreigners. And people certainly want the currency that the foreigners use because it's worth a lot more. So navigating that system is very difficult for anyone. And so what you can use that foreign money to purchase something, it may not seem expensive to us on face value, but to a Cuban, again, who's making $80 a month, it's almost insurmountable to buy something as simple as, say, a pair of shoes or, say, a refrigerator for their house. So it's a very challenging system to navigate, and that hasn't changed in the years since relations have been normalized. Certainly.
And did people see you as a tourist from the United States and approach you, hoping to sell you an item?
Everybody in Cuba has a hustle, basically. So, and it's the way that they survive. So people come up to you saying, oh, I want to give you a ride in my 1961 Chevrolet Malibu, whatever, when you're trying to just go across town to a meeting. So that's one example where people try to make money any way they can. A lot of people sell things on the side of the road. I remember buying something as simple as cookies to take in my car, and that was bought on the side of the road, and that was their way of supporting themselves, and it was maybe a couple of dollars, but that was a significant amount of money that they would make in a day. So you saw a lot of that sort of thing going on in Cuba, not just in Havana, but across the country.
So we've got a minute left. Your main impressions and the biggest challenges you see the nation facing as it works to today's standards.
I must say the people in Cuba were absolutely fantastic. They were very warm, very welcoming, very happy to see Americans coming to Cuba. I will say it's very challenging for these folks just to make a living in the sense, as I said, putting food on the table, keeping a roof over their head. The infrastructure is really far from ideal. So a lot of people talk about Cuba opening up, but they really have a long way to go to make the country live up to its full potential, one could argue. So I think, the normalization is certainly a step in that direction, but there's a long way to go before, people are going to be able to go visit Cuba en masse. So I hope the process continues to move forward and benefits the Cuban people who really have suffered a long time under policies that are really beyond their control.
Maintaining their identity, though.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people feel like, it's going to become the next Miami Beach with the skyscrapers on every inch of the coastline.
Hopefully they can hold on to what makes Cuba such a special place. Certainly.
Sounds like it was. I'm glad you had a great trip. Thanks for telling us about it. Really fun to hear about it. Michael Lavers of the Washington Blade. And we're back with more. A program note in just a minute. Stick around.